The following story has been brought to you by StoriesToInspire.org.
It's one of the greatest stories that I ever heard. And of course, I'm writing it up. Mitzvah Hashem, it'll come out soon. An unbelievable story that I just heard a few weeks ago. It's a wonderful, wonderful fellow. His name is Avram Ruvain Lokich. He learned in Yeshiva Shah Torah here many years ago in Queens, in Kew Gardens. Today he's in the Boston area, and he has a kiruv organization called Ma'or. And what he does, he goes to the Boston University and the other colleges in that area, and he tries to be Makarev, and he has classes and seminars and the trips to Eretz Yisrael. And he told me about this kid. Of course, he couldn't say his name, so let's call him Brian. He was working on this kid, Brian, in 2009, trying to be Makarev him. The guy was not interested in tefillin, not in Shabbos, not in kashrus, nothing. He couldn't budge him. He sent him to Eretz Yisrael with a whole group, going and geholfen. Nothing. In 2011, he decided he's going to send him again. He didn't give up. And this time, Rabbi Lokich went along. And they learned in Harnof, in a yeshiva, in the morning. They had some classes. And then they traveled many other different places. And, of course, with the classes and with the excursions that they went, and with Rabbi Lokich being there, the kid came back, and he said to Rabbi Lokich, okay, I'm ready. You're ready? One thing. That's all. One thing I'm going to do. One thing. But don't bother me about anything. I just want to do one thing. So Rabbi Lokich told me he thought for sure the kid is, like most Balei Tshuva. When they start, I won't use a cell phone on Shabbos. I won't eat any tray for meat anymore. This kid decides he's going to wear tzitzis. Now, Rabbi Lokich said, wasn't going to ask him, why do you pick tzitzis of all the things you pick? The tzitzis. Well, okay, listen, if he's doing that, fine. Alavai. Good. Starts wearing tzitzis. They came back at the end of June 2011. In August, this kid goes back to his mother in Utica, New York, upstate New York. His mother's not from, and Tisha B'Av is coming. So he says to his mother, Ma, I want to go to the Orthodox synagogue. I want to be at the Tisha B'Av program in the Orthodox synagogue. She said, okay, I'll drive you. She drives him to the Tisha B'Av on Tisha B'Av, and they come into this shul, this Orthodox shul in Utica. As they walk in, there's a big plaque. On the plaque is his grandfather's name. He can't believe it. His grandfather was honored by this shul. He says, Ma, you never told me this. Your dad was involved in the Orthodox shul? She said, I left it. I went to Reform, so I never thought to tell you. I didn't think it was important. And he's standing there, and he wants to read about his grandfather. And an old man comes by, and he says, excuse me, sir, you know that man that's on the plaque? He said, what do you mean? That was my grandfather. He said, well, he was such a special person. He said, what do you mean? Why was he special? What did he do? He said he made sure that every kid in this shul wore tzitzis. And any kid that wore tzitzis, he gave money. And the kids would come in, they would pick up their shirts, and they showed them they were wearing tzitzis. And when this kid heard that, he burst into tears. How did that happen? How did he pick tzitzis? He had no idea whatsoever. He had no idea whatsoever that his grandfather had an atiyah to the mitzvah of tzitzis. And you know something? He cried throughout that whole Tisha B'Av. And eventually he became an Erlich HaBal Tshuva. That was the thing that turned it around. And I want to tell you a medrash, how this happened. The medrash is in Shmois Rabbah, Perik Daled Ois Beis. Take a look at it. It tells us Yisro saved Moshe Rabbeinu. He protected Moshe Rabbeinu from Parai. So many generations later, his descendant, Yisro's descendant, Sisra, his descendant Yael killed Sisra. Why? Listen to this. Mikana Talomet. Misha Kibel al Atzmai Lasais mitzvah. If somebody's makabel upon himself to do a mitzvah, Ein Oisa mitzvah Paysach Krohn. That mitzvah becomes part of your DNA. And it's not going to stop even in the future generations. So this grandfather in Utica, he had that love of that mitzvah of tzitzis. It continued in the generations later. I'll tell you a great story. What does it mean when people care for each other? A couple of weeks ago, I was in a town community in Waterbury, Connecticut. So there was a father that was making a bar mitzvah for his son. So he says, Rabbi, I want to tell you a story about my son that I didn't tell anybody. I'm waiting for the bar mitzvah to tell the family and friends this story about my son. He said, here in Waterbury, all the kids, they go to school by bus. And there's 10 stops on the bus route. So my son gets on the third stop. And there's 7 other boys, always 8 kids that get on at that stop. He said a few weeks ago, there was only 7 boys at the bus stop. And my son gets on the bus, the father saying, and as he's walking to the back of the bus, there's a big window. He sees that the 8th kid is a block and a half away, and he's running towards the bus. So he yells up front, guys, tell the bus driver, that he should wait because, that fellow's coming. The bus driver either was in a bad mood or just was plain nasty. And he said the kid should have been here on time. And he drives away. Well, when that kid, a block and a half, sees the bus is driving away, he started running faster and he tripped and he fell. So the father says, at the next bus stop, my son got off and he started walking back to that kid because he didn't want that kid should have to walk to school by himself, embarrassed and hurt, that he fell. He said, I'm so proud that he did that. And he says, you know what happened? When the other kids on the bus saw that that's what my son was doing, they all ran up to the bus driver and they said, listen, you got to stop the bus, either wait for them or make a right turn, and come around and pick them up. And that's what the bus driver did. Made a U-turn all the way around and he brought the kids to school. And the father said, I'm so proud of my son. And when I heard that story, I was so proud of that little boy because that little boy is my grandson. And that's what my son Avram was saying about his son Eliezer. And that's beautiful. You know why it happens? Because when you have a father who cares, the son is going to care.
Rabbi Shmulevitz, Zecher Tzadik Levrocha, was one of the Rosh Yeshivas in the Mir Yeshiva. I have a son-in-law, Ephraim Perlstein, who lives in Far Rockaway. He learned in Mir for a number of years, and for some amount of time he was able to learn B'chavrusa with Rabbi Foyle. And Rabbi Foyle told him this remarkable story. There was a young couple that lived in Yerushalayim. They were living in an apartment building. Everything was fine. And then one day, an elderly couple moved to this neighborhood from South Africa. Now, it was an older man and an older woman. They had been married many, many years. The woman did not want to move to Eretz Yisrael, but she knew her husband did. He wanted to live out his final years in Eretz Yisrael. But she grew up in Johannesburg. She had so many friends there. But okay, fine. That's what her husband wanted, so fine. She was a dedicated wife, and the Chalamaisis, Eretz Yisrael is Eretz Yisrael, and so they moved. Tragically, just a few months after they moved to Eretz Yisrael, when they were just getting acclimated to the neighborhood and to friends, new friends, the husband got sick and he died. Now, there was no way the woman could go back to South Africa. She had already sold her house and sold her possessions, so she was stuck here, and she was in a bad mood. And this family, the Farbers that lived upstairs from them, they had a lot of kinderlach. And of course, the kids would always run around as kids do. And this lady, because she was in a bad mood, she would come upstairs many times and she would yell at Rabbi and Mrs. Farber. Your kids are running around and making a lot of noise, especially on Shabbos. I'm trying to rest. I mean, the kids were just kids. It got to the point that on one Shabbos afternoon, she came upstairs. She was yelling and screaming at the parents. The parents were so humiliated. The kids were so frightened. Rabbi Farber didn't know what to do. So he went to Rabbi Foyle Shmulevitz. And he said, Rabbi, tell me, what should I do? I don't know what to do. Should I tell her to move? Should we move? Should I go to the owner of the apartment building and complain? I don't know what to do. And Rabbi Foyle said, you're not doing anything wrong. You have children. Children can run around. But, as you told me, she's never very sad. She lost her husband. She's in a new area. And really, this is a shaila for Rabbi Yashiv, because you're dealing with an almana. But then Rabbi Foyle said, something, before we go to Rabbi Yashiv, let me give you some advice. Try this. If it doesn't work, then we'll go to Rabbi Yashiv, but try this. He said, I want you from now on to try to befriend this lady. Go upstairs and see if you can do things for her. Maybe you could set her Shabbos clock. Maybe you could take out her garbage. When you're going shopping, call her up and say, I know it's hard for you to get out. Maybe we can do some shopping for you. Get rubber cups for the chairs so that when you move the chairs on Shabbos, it's not going to make that kind of noise. And Rabbi and Mrs. Farber started going out of their way to become so friendly and so giving to this lady that she totally changed her attitude. And sometimes she would even come upstairs to babysit for the kids. And this went on for years. And when the Farber family got bigger, the family grew and they had to move. This lady was crying and she said, the Farbers were from the best friends that I ever had. And because he went to make peace, because he went to ask the Shaila to see how he could make peace. And Rabbi Foyle Shmulevitz taught him the lesson. You know how you make peace? Become a giving person. Give compliments. Be helpful to those that you think may be your adversaries. Think of a way that somebody who's angry at you, how you could do them a favor. And in that way, you win them over. And that way you can bring shalom. And that's exactly what they did.
Enjoyed this story? Come again. Bring a friend. StoriesToInspire.org